Our communion hymn is Near the Cross, 385 in the green hymnal, if you'd like to look at there. Jesus, keep me near the cross, there a precious fountain, free to all a healing stream, flows from Calvary's mountain. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, O Lamb of God, bring its scenes before me, where the bright and morning star sheds its beams around me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my raptured soul shall find rest beyond the river.
We're going to go this morning to Mark chapter 7 and look at verses 1 through 8, and then we'll skip down to verses 14 and 15, and then we'll skip on down a little bit further to 21 and through 23. This is starting on page 40 of the New Testament of the Pew Bible. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes had come from Jerusalem, gathered around him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from their market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples do not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied right about your hypocrisies. As it is written, the people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines." You want to look that up? That's Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. "You abandon the commandments of God and hold to human tradition." Then we skip down to verses 14 through 15. "Then he called the crowd again and said to them, 'Listen to me, all of you, and understand there is nothing outside of a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defiles.'" And then verses 21 through 23. "For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions become fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice," which is an extreme greed or selfishness, a desire to accumulate massive amounts of wealth, "wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All of these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." You know, we've covered this a lot of times. When I first came here, I did a little series of lessons in one of the Sunday school class on Old Testament law. And there's so much of Old Testament law, the law of Moses, that deals with this concept of clean and unclean. The books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy both give a long list of what was considered to be clean and unclean in terms of what you could eat, what you could touch, what you could associate with, or even be involved with. And I challenge everyone here sometime when you have a few minutes to kill, read Leviticus chapter 11. It's not a really long read. You'll probably be on it for a while because it's a very detailed read. You won't find it boring. You'll find it fascinating and interesting, I'll guarantee you. And it's not the only passage that deals with this concept of clean and unclean. The topic was a major part of the law of Moses. Touching an unclean object, or being touched by an unclean object, even if it was accidental, could result in being quarantined and in having to undergo a massive cleansing process before that person could be pronounced clean once more and able to engage in normal daily activities. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, is that not very similar to what we're doing right now? You know, I went over to the hospital this past week to pick up some medicine, and of course you're met there at the door, and they pull out this list. Have you been outside the country? Have you come in contact with anybody that you know that has COVID, or all of that stuff? And here we are, if we come in contact with somebody that has COVID, we're quarantined for 2 weeks and checked and watched to make sure that we don't have any signs of the infection itself. Very similar to this clean and unclean that we read about here that Jesus is talking about. But the thing of it was, the Pharisees had taken this clean and unclean concept to an exact science that included this list, extensive list, far more than what you're going to find when you read that chapter in Leviticus. And some of these processes that they had developed to handle this uncleanliness were very elaborate, including this hand-washing ritual that is talked about in today's service. Now, we know today, and you and I know, we've been told a gazillion times the proper way to wash your hands. You put antiseptic soap on, and then you rub them together vigorously while singing Happy Birthday to Me 2 times. Then you rinse off your hands and you dry them properly, which is blotting. Don't rub them on the towel. Blot them, and that's exactly how it's done, right? So we have our hand-washing ritual as well. Now, I think our tendency as human beings sometimes is to make fun of others for what they do, and we don't realize that we have our rituals as well. And we have our reasons for our rituals, certainly. Nobody's going to argue that hand washing is not a good idea right now, not with all the germs that are out there. But look at it this way. If you were in the bathroom scrubbing your hands and singing Happy Birthday to me, Happy Birthday to me 2 times while you were doing so, and a Pharisee walked in and saw you, what do you think they would do? How do you think they would react? Oh boy, there's something. Yeah, uh-huh. Woo! This guy's got a problem. They would probably react to us very much the way we would react to them. Of all the crazy things I ever heard of in all my life. But that's the way it is. You see? It wasn't this ritual. So the Pharisees had this elaborate hand-washing ceremony that they went through. They had to rub both hands all the way up to the elbow. It had to be scrubbed up to the elbow. So many times. Yeah. So they had this elaborate ceremony. So do we. It's not the ceremony. It didn't matter. It wasn't the ritual. So what was the actual problem? What was Jesus upset about? Years ago, a young man named Tyler started a controversial Instagram program, which he called Preacher in Sneakers. Now, what Tyler had noted is a large number of church worship leaders were preaching services in very elaborate suits and shoes. And he got to thinking about this, and what is the message? You know, Tyler was a Christian. He didn't want to start problems, but what is the actual message? We're talking about a poor carpenter's son who wore very modest clothing, sandals. Sometimes he was even barefoot. And these ministers are in designer clothing and very expensive shoes. So what is the impression? Does the looks match the message?
All right.
That was his concern. And I'm not saying that preachers should dress trashy or that we shouldn't be concerned about our appearance as much as we can. I know some of our appearances, we can't do much to help it. God gave me this face. I'm kind of stuck with it. I guess you are a little bit too. Could go to cosmetic surgery, but then I could look like some of those Hollywood stars that went under the knives. You see me before and after pictures, I know. Yeah, cosmetic surgery doesn't always work. But here was the true message that Tyler was trying to send out. The outer appearance did not match the contents of the message. The message was one of humbleness, sacrifice, concern, service to the one who came to serve, not to be served. The outer appearance of these ministers that he was seeing was one of extravagance and public display. And they certainly weren't poor, or were they suffering, or were they sacrificing, or were they very humble. The message didn't match the appearance. And this is what the Pharisees were doing. The message was supposed to be a message of service to God and God's people, and their dedication for God's people. But their appearance screamed loudly, it's all about me. Me and my elaborate clothes. Me and all of my possessions. Me and my status. Me and my power. That was the message the Pharisees were giving in their appearance, in the way that they looked. It may not be what came out of their mouth, but it was what their actions said, loud and clear. And this was the message that Tyler was trying to get across. And we've seen so much of this in our world today. This COVID-19 thing, come on, this has been really crazy. We've had political leaders that have preached to avoid travel, always wear your mask, stay at home. And then we hear that same person within an hour after they made that statement, left on an airplane to fly to Florida to be with their daughter for their birthday. Or after having a council meeting and closing down restaurants because they were too dangerous, gathered their friends together and went directly to a local fancy restaurant for a meal. And at no time were seen wearing masks. There was a mayor down in Texas who actually recorded his stay-at-home message from his favorite vacation spot in Mexico, telling people to stay home. You know, we see so much of this kind of thing going on in our society, and we come to accept it. Well, that's the way it is. And in Jesus' time, people weren't stupid. They knew the Pharisees were not practicing what they preached. And just like us, that's what you're going to do about it. I guess that's the way it is. But it wasn't the way it is to Jesus. It was not acceptable to him. And he spoke out. He made it plain, I'm not going to accept it. He had some strong words to say about that. It's not acceptable. You see, there are two ways that our habits, our rituals, you want to call them rituals, habits, can become dangerous. And one way is when we continue to do what we've always done, even though it no longer gets us results. When a ritual becomes so much of a habit that we hang on to it, even when it no longer serves the purpose, what it was intended to accomplish, either in our daily lives or in our church lives, you get on a thin borderline of what is known as insanity. Remember the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again exactly the same way, and honestly think you're going to get a different result. And it's a rut we all fall into, and it is hard to get out of, I'll guarantee you. I've talked about this in many sermons. We often need to take a step back and take a fresh look at what we're doing and ask ourselves the questions. Is this work actually working? Is this doing what I should be doing? Is this actually serving the Lord? Is this getting the results it should be getting? You know, see, it's so easy over the course of time to accept that that's the way it is because it's always been done that way, and never realize it could be done any way differently. And that's a human problem. It's existed since the beginning of time, and it most likely is going to continue to exist until the end of time. It's not just a church problem. It exists in every part of our lives. And the Pharisees had reached that point. That's the way it was. It'd been done that way forever. Forever means that it'd been done that way for so long as nobody can remember when it really started. We just always did it that way. Or sometimes it can even mean it's been done twice. In that case, it's a tradition. But it wasn't that hand washing that got Jesus upset. If that's the way you guys do it, then okay, wash your hands. You know, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? We wash our hands. We wash our pots and pans. Now, I know you've heard that expression, cleanliness is next to godliness, many, many times. Probably thought it come from the Bible. It doesn't. The Bible does indicate that cleanliness is important, and both ancient and Hebrew and Babylonian texts mention the importance of cleaning. But the expression itself first came out of a sermon preached by John Wesley in 1778. That's where we get it. It's not from the Bible. But here's where the problem began. And this is the second thing that can happen when we let a tradition, a ritual, or a habit become so much a part of us that we lose sight of why it is there. The habit becomes an end unto itself. It actually becomes a law. It doesn't need justification. It becomes a law. In fact, when someone's habit has become so much a part of them, we often use that expression that they practice it religiously. And I know you've heard that expression, meaning the habit has so much significance to their life that it is practiced with the same kind of fervor someone would practice religious beliefs. And this is where the Pharisees went wrong. There is absolutely nothing in the 613 commandments found in the law of Moses that specifies the hand-washing routine that the Pharisees were using. It's not one of the commandments. Yet it was treated by the Pharisees as the equal to any one of those commandments. That was the fault. Jesus and his disciples' failure to follow this ritual was being treated as if Jesus had violated one of the commandments of God's law. But it was not a commandment of God's law. It was a ritual that belonged to the Pharisees. This is where they crossed the line. You know, we've all heard that expression, who died and made you king? And this is what Jesus is implicating to the Pharisees. By what authority, what right do you have to make your ritual, your little habit, your little ceremony equal to God's law? And that's what had happened. This hand-washing habit had been elevated to the level of a law from God. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. And that is exactly what Jesus quoted from Isaiah. And then Jesus goes on to say, you abandon the commandments of God and hold to human tradition. That was the problem. They had taken this man-made creed, and they had made this creed equal to God's divine law. And that's why Jesus was so upset. The Pharisees had become so concerned with what they touched and what went into their bodies and how clean it was, they had forgotten that the hand-washing ritual and other rituals that they practiced concerning cleaning had come into existence to help them have healthy bodies. The rituals were nothing but tools. They weren't law, they were tools. But they were making them laws. And Jesus continued his lesson by telling them that it's not what goes into the body that causes sin. It's what comes out of the body that brings us to sin. It's the human heart. Within the human heart, evil intentions come. It's out of the mouth that evil words are spoken. It's out of the human body, with the use of these arms and these legs, that evil deeds are done. It's not what goes in, it's what comes out. Something goes into your body, shouldn't be in there. Worst thing you can do is make you sick, throw up. Well, I guess it could kill you if you wrong stuff. But, if it doesn't kill you, you're only going to make you better sooner or later. But sin can do a lot of damage beyond anything we can imagine. Sin can sometimes do damage that cannot be repaired, at least not in human terms. You and I can't fix it. Jesus can fix it. You and I can't fix it. And that's what Jesus was telling. They needed to be more concerned about what was coming out. The message they were sending out to the people. This opulence, this arrogance, all of this pomp and circumstance. Was that the message of God? No. No, that was not the message of God. The message of God was humbleness. The message of God was service. The message of God was concern. Author Brennan Manning once wrote, said the greatest single cause of atheism in this world are Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and then walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what the world finds to be unbelievable. Indeed, they do. It is the message that Jesus gives us in warning us that the lifestyles of lavish robes, extravagant decorations, open display of religious practices designed basically to attract attention, as much attention as possible, insistence on rituals, on rules that bind people as much as God's law, all added up to the fact that they were serving God with their lips, and yet their hearts were far from God. That was the message of Jesus. And Jesus reminds us that God's intent was to point people towards the law, but not for the law and the law's sake alone. The purpose of the law was to point people to God. The law was given to bring people to God, not the law was given to bring people to the law. The purpose of God's law now, today, is the same. Jesus didn't die on the cross to really bring us to Christianity. Christianity was created to bring us to Jesus. And that's the point the Pharisees were completely missing. They were so involved in the law and the strict obedience to the law that they completely missed the idea that the purpose of the law was to bring the people closer to God. And we forget it as well. Sometimes as Christians, we get so involved in our church, we forget that we're here to bring people to Christ.
Amen. Amen.
See, Jesus' earthly ministry was aimed at pointing people towards Him. That's why we come to that table. We need to remember the message Jesus was giving to the Pharisees. Our job is to bring people to Christ. Our worship, this building, what we do are simply tools. Tools that we use to help build ourselves up so that we're able to go out and spread His Word. The rituals, the procedures that we use in our worship are simply tools that help us to be better prepared to serve God. That's it. Because what's really important, what the Pharisees and the scribes missed, our traditions, our rituals are not about themselves. They're there for the purpose of serving God. Because it is God's work that is first and foremost. Amen.
Let's sing our hymn of invitation. It's number 467 in the green hymnal, if you want to use that. Anywhere with Jesus. Stand. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere He leads me in this world below. Anywhere without Him, dearest joys would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I am not alone. Other friends may fail me, He is still my own. Though His hand may lead me over dreary ways, anywhere with Jesus is a house of praise. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus over land and sea, telling souls in darkness of salvation free, ready as His summons me to go or stay. Anywhere with Jesus when He points the way. Anywhere, here I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go.
You know, habits are hard to break. We get into a habit, and we can and often find ourselves very resistant to any possibility of giving it up. If you don't believe that, ask somebody who used to smoke. Even when you know that it's not a good habit, it's still hard to give up. That's why developing good habits are so important. Habits that are beneficial to us and won't harm us. Things like good hygiene habits are always buckling your seatbelt, or always attempting to eat a balanced diet, or even going to church. Yes, going to church is a habit. It's one that once you get into, then you automatically get up on Sunday morning, you get ready, and you go. It's a part of you. It's totally normal as going to work on Monday. And even when you retire, it's still a part of you. You still get up and you go to church without even thinking about it. Regretfully, this pandemic has created somewhat of a dilemma. Something that we understood would eventually become a problem, and we've anticipated what we could do about it. However, this latest round of COVID, Part D, has thrown us off our game plan. The over a year-long confrontation with COVID has produced online church in far greater numbers than we ever knew in the past. In fact, I never envisioned that I would be a TV evangelist or televangelist at any time before COVID, yet here I am. Not alone in this situation, we find that most churches are experiencing the same problem. On the national level, about 1 out of every 3 people who were active Christians before COVID have dropped out since the beginning of the pandemic. And by dropped out, we mean they are no longer involved in church, online or in person, drive-in church, or any other form of church. They've completely left the fold. Maybe we've made it too easy not to come to church. You can watch online, never have to change your clothes, never have to get ready, don't have to worry about the drive, don't have to sit through some long-winded sermon. It's like church on demand, like offering a movie on Netflix, except you don't have to pay for it. The fact that COVID somehow continues to linger around doesn't help our efforts to get people back either. It's created a new challenge for us as ministers, and we have to figure out a way to re-church people. See, going to church is a habit. It's an easy habit to get out of, and a very hard habit to get back into once you do get out of it. But being there in fellowship with other believers is totally different from sitting at home and watching it on the computer. There's an air of oneness in the sanctuary that you'll not know at home. There's a spirit in this place that you cannot feel at home. There is the support of others that you will not experience as long as you stay within your 4 walls. It's not the same as being here. So hopefully, as this surge in COVID cases lessens in the months ahead, more of you will be able to find your way back into the pews. Remember, our doors are always open every Sunday, and you're always welcome. Come on in. We're waiting for you. Until next week, I'm Larry Childress for Crestwood Christian Church. We'd love to see you, or at least hear from you. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 97, Crestwood, Kentucky, 40014. Thanks for watching. Until next week, God bless you and take care of you.